guys. Welcome to the Business Chicks podcast, where real talk meets real strategies.
And we are your hosts, Kim and Michelle. And together we have over 60 years. That sounds like so many. Over 60 combined years of experience in business, marketing, and leadership. And sales. I don't know why I forgot the word sales. Sales.
On the show, we cut through the noise and share the lessons, wins, and setbacks that shaped our careers so you can shortcut the learning curve in yours.
Absolutely. And whether you are climbing the business ladder or building your business, or really just looking for straight talk from other women about business and life in general, you come to the right place. So this is the Business
Chicks podcast.
Okay. Let's get
to business.
All right. Tonight we are going to be talking about we're going to start off with talking about this movie, Swiped. Michelle, I texted you the other day and I was like, oh my God, you got to watch this movie. So what were your first thoughts about it?
It was a lot different than I expected. I think it was really well done. I felt like, and of course, I to be honest with you, didn't even really know that much about it, which shocked me as I watched the movie that I didn't know that these things were happening. And
I didn't either.
That's sad.
Absolutely. I didn't either. And, when I was watching it, I was like, exactly your thoughts. This is sad, right? Tinder, which I don't think I've ever even opened ever. Tinder, I've been married 28 years and I have never had a need for Tinder. But I haven't even opened it ever. But of course, you have to be living under a rock to not have heard of Tinder and know what it is. But I literally had zero idea of the history behind Tinder, and that this woman, Whitney Wolfe Herd, was actually the brains behind it. And that's kind of the whole point of the movie, right?
Yeah, it was. And it was just, I felt like it was impactful on many different levels when you're watching it. And, none of this is spoiler alerts. If you haven't seen it, I really encourage people to watch it. So I want to throw that out there that we're not here to do a spoiler alert. But if you know the story, which I did not, you probably know all these things. But it really resonated on multiple different levels to me in the fact of how she acted with her seat at the table. And then after she realized how fragile the seat at the table was, how she acted. So it was just very interesting, but I think it was a very genuine, in the thought process to me from a woman's perspective of how we feel and think when those things happen. I felt like
100%. And, in the beginning, I want to be very careful about the way I say this, because I was saying it to you even the other day. I was like, oh, that was such a mistake. And oh, that was her first mistake. And to be fair, she did make a lot of mistakes, but she was young, right? And that's unfortunately what happens with a lot of women. And sometimes, our mistakes aren't as heavy or as visible because we don't have that level of success right away. Yeah. She had some massive success. So of course, her mistakes ended up being big it's not really her fault, right? It's just not knowing and being trusting. And I think that was one of her biggest mistakes, if you want to call it that, was being trusting and naive. But, it's how we kind of live when we're living authentically and we expect everybody else to be a good person like we are, right?
Right. Well, you expect that you're getting the same level of respect from people that you're giving. And I think that is part of the thing. I also think it goes back to, and it really sat with me on, she went to college and learned all these things, but you know what they didn't talk to her about? Women in business. Because, and you and I've had this conversation, and you've had this conversation with other people as well, where there are so many things we have to think about when we're sitting at that table. And I'm not even talking about being in the C-suite. I'm talking about any table, right? Just in the whole mix of things, all of the women there that had to either pause what they were saying because they thought they had to pause what they were saying because, oh, there's a guy talking and they're listening to him. And that is exactly what was happening. And those are the things they don't put in you when you're in college. Like, those are the things they don't pull out and say, "Let's
Absolutely.
have a class about women in business," but not from the business perspective, from the woman's perspective and how to handle it, how to navigate those waters.
Mhm. Oh, you're so true because it's like on the surface, if I didn't know better, like if we didn't know this was based on a true story, right? If we
Mhm.
didn't know that, well, and I didn't really know that until it started going, but if we didn't know that, I would have thought this was an analogy in general
Mhm.
for women in business, right? And the things
Right,
like you're saying that sometimes we aren't taught, or the things not to do, or cautions to look out for. But even bigger than that, the fact that when she did, get the seat on the table, the pressure didn't stop. It got worse, right?
right,
Not the seat on the table, but the seat at the table. The pressure
right.
didn't stop. It got worse because then it
Mhm.
was, how do I maintain this? How do I continue to, be perceived as one of the guys? And it ended up,
Mhm.
like you said, I don't want to give too many spoiler alerts, but it ended up teaching her some hard lessons about staying
Mhm.
true to yourself and
Mhm.
how to sort of not care so much about the judgments that other people place on you in the
Right.
workplace, being true to yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the big thing is even to the end, right? Trying to stay true to yourself was so very difficult
Mhm.
in a perspective that we think of. And sometimes even, things happening that aren't happening to you, whether you not believe is not the right word, but whether you think they really are happening
Mhm.
or not, right? Because the whole
Absolutely.
movie is really it's about so much more than dating apps, even though that's
Absolutely,
that's
for
really
sure.
the focus, but there's just so much packed in, than that,
Mhm.
in my opinion.
For sure. And it's, like what we were talking about, and looking at, your show notes, talking about the swipe
Mhm,
mentality in general, right? And
mhm,
how that
mhm,
that mentality, it's not just a dating app, it's bigger than that. Like you said, it
right.
actually shapes the opportunities that women get, because sometimes we feel like if we don't manage it, dare I say, manipulate the situation
Mhm,
correctly, right? The right way, and
mhm,
do the right things and say the right things at the right time with the right people in the right rooms, that we will be just swiped away, and there'll be somebody right
mhm,
there behind us. And, unfortunately, not all women, and we talked about this in our last show, not all women have that same,
mhm.
girl code mentality. And to be fair, maybe because that's what life has taught them, right? Um,
Right, mhm,
so, it is. A woman can easily be just swiped away, or that's how we feel.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's something that you and I have learned over time, but and maybe it's because of this, you know, these conversations we're
Mhm,
having, that
mhm.
it just really is resonating more with what is not being talked about
Yep,
anywhere. And you look
absolutely.
at some of these people and you look at some of the CEOs that we talked about and things like that and how it's not being addressed and not being focused on. And is it because it's, well, yeah, there is a woman who's right for the job. However, she's too emotional, she's too this, she does, it doesn't
Mhm.
matter, sort
A
of
lot.
thing. And she's a lot, right? We don't want to bring emotion into the situation, I think was one of the comments roughly from the movie, right? Well, let's not bring
Mhm,
emotion into the
mhm,
thing. You have to bring emotion in,
mhm,
but that's not what it's all about. It's all about making quick judgments, you
mhm.
know? And what are we
The
judging on?
Yeah, the conversation that goes on in our head, the just litany of
Right.
thoughts, right?
Mhm. Exactly.
Well, real
Exactly.
quick, before we dive into, really talking more about the swipe culture and business, I'm gonna play a trailer, and just so that our audience, if they haven't seen it, can know what we're talking about. And I went through a couple of the different trailers, and I think that the one that I'm going to share is probably the closest to my favorite. But you know what's really interesting? I think we're a little bit ahead of the curve here, because normally you can find tons and tons and tons of clips, stuff on YouTube. I mean, from every movie out there, right? Well,
Right.
I couldn't find my favorite clip, which was the
Interesting.
line. I'll talk about it after the trailer. I'll say what my favorite line was. I think I've already told you, but let's watch the official trailer. Let our audience watch it real quick. Here we go. Let's see if I can hit the play button.
Maybe I should stop being shocked by success after the past few months we've had.
It's pretty all-consuming. We're together all the time. It's a big family. Families can get messy, right? Young people don't date online. If we break through that stigma, suddenly we've got complete market share of all millennial dating. Just give me $600 and a plane ticket, and I will come back with the next 400 company. With Tinder, I'm swiping right.
How do I download it? I want to see this.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
We are netting over 10,000 new signups a day.
You are the brains behind this Tinder explosion.
There's 1 million users.
There's an article about how pervasive the dick pics are. They report and nothing happens.
These chicks are just reporting guys who reject them.
You do not really mean that.
Yeah, I mean, we need to be practical, not emotional.
I built Tinder with them. If they can just delete me, it's like they've done nothing wrong.
You say anything, they can sue.
Do not take the bait.
What is this big secret project you are developing?
We need to change the rules of online dating. Fight for what you've built. My name's Whitney Wolfe, and I'm starting a revolution.
Such a good trailer, even. But
It really is good.
so my favorite line was, and again, if you know the story, I don't want to give away too much, but if you know the story, very early on, she's massively innovative, right? She is just definitely the powerhouse and comes up with a way to make Tinder essentially what it is. But in the meantime, she also starts a relationship with the founder's best friend, who is also a founder. And he turns out to be a little, for lack of a better word, a little psycho. Don't you think?
A little bit.
A little psycho. Sorry if he's still the founder. I don't know, but sorry, God. But you were a little psycho, at least as portrayed by the movie.
He's portrayed, yeah.
Allegedly, right? Allegedly, according to the movie,
Yes.
you're portrayed as psycho. So
Correct.
anyway, she decides she can't live with it anymore. She can't be with this guy in this relationship, and she thinks it's all just going to go back to normal. It's going to be, they're going to have this good working relationship, only to find out, no, that's not happening. And so she goes to the head founder, right? And she says, I can't work with him anymore. And he says, oh, really? Why? There's no way to work this out. And she'd already tried to work it out. She'd asked him to intervene. That didn't work. So she's like, no, I cannot work with him anymore. Oh, this was after she had walked through a meeting that was with her team, and he was calling her a whore. Oh no, he wasn't. Someone on the
wasn't
team
one of the other guys.
and he allowed it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's after that. And she says, I can't work with him anymore. And he goes, okay, so then you're resigning. And just like that, she found out how disposable she was, even though she was really the power behind it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
There's so many lessons in that, right?
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Is it gives you, again, it goes to the swipe left, swipe right. As soon as she opened up that door about not being able to work together, it was never a conversation about
who's going to go.
Well, how do we work this out? Or, okay, if I separate you two, can we do this? Okay, you're a valued member of the team. We got blah, blah, blah. None of that conversation happened. It was, okay, give your stuff to IT. They'll, it was automatic. I need you to send me an email in writing that you're resigning. And it was just an automatic of, okay, well, that means you're resigning. That's what I heard in that moment.
Yep. And never a conversation, not, well, let me bring him in here. Let's see, he was the one doing the things, right? It never a conversation. But that's when, again, poor Whitney, I'm sorry if you're ever watching this. I'm not really being as critical as I'm probably sounding, because I think these are lessons, again, we don't learn. But I'm sitting there calculating all the things that went wrong, right? Is we learn at that point in time that she had been made a founder of Tinder, but she
Mhm.
didn't have that in writing or any kind of
That's
split,
right.
any kind of. So of course, her only recourse was to hire a lawyer, who then was basically, you don't have the money that Tinder has, so you're
Right.
just gonna have to take what they give you, which included her never being able to talk about what happened.
Right. That she had to sign the NDA. And, it's easy to sit and, Monday morning quarterback of what she was
Right.
going through, right? Because we all know anybody who's been in a toxic relationship, or whether it's a friendship, a family, a significant other, anything like that,
Mhm.
you're not in your right headspace.
No. Yeah.
So to try and make significant decisions, because she wasn't making decisions just about her life, it was about
Right.
her career and her
And her team.
future and everything, and the people that were working with her and the other women that were there, and that
Mhm.
there were so many things that she was trying to work through in her head. I can only imagine. Now,
Absolutely.
it doesn't go through any of that in the movie, but as I'm
Right.
watching it, as a woman who's been in business and in situations, I'm just like, I can just imagine what's going through her head and how she's, number one, trying to figure out how she got here and blaming herself, like,
Mhm.
oh, I never should have done X, Y, and Z. And
Mhm.
yeah, she did we all make mistakes.
Mhm.
And she was young. I mean, especially when we're young, we make mistakes. And
Mhm.
she was catapulted
Yeah.
into a situation, so there's so many things. And I'm sure that she would sit back now and be like, yeah, no,
Oh, for sure.
I know where I messed up,
Mhm.
but that doesn't change the fact that she put in all this work and was working. I mean, most of her days and nights were spent there,
Absolutely. Her
working.
entire life,
Mhm.
everything, I
Mhm.
mean, the good news is, I guess this is going to be spoiler alert. So in the movie, I want to mute it for a second, but again, the story's out there, right? But the good news is she gets the chance that most people don't, right? She gets a do-over essentially.
Mhm.
And, she gets the opportunity to create what we now know as Bumble. And she made up tenfold for the
Mhm.
errors in judgment maybe that she made due to naivete and just not
Yes.
knowing she was younger, and did became everything that she had hoped to be. So she learned her
Mhm.
lesson quickly. That's fantastic, because sometimes we don't, right? We don't learn our
Mhm.
lesson quickly all the
Mhm.
time.
Yeah.
So she did.
Absolutely.
She did.
Mhm.
She made some hard decisions, even in Bumble, and they turned out great. They worked
Mhm.
well for her. And
Mhm.
kudos to her. I'm sure now she's a strong mentor to many. But you
Right.
were saying something the other day when you were telling me, oh, I watched the movie, and it really kind of struck me is one of the biggest lessons, I guess, that during the movie that I was really getting from it is, sometimes as women in business, we think like women, right? And
Mhm.
that's good in some ways, right? We don't ever want to lose our empathy. We don't ever want to lose our compassion. But when it
Mhm.
comes to preparing ourselves to sit at the table, we need to put in, like you're saying, those things that aren't taught in school. We need to put in the conscious effort to
Mhm.
think like men and make sure that we aren't just going with, and this is not in a critical way, but going with emotion and thinking everything's going to work itself out. But we've got to remember to think logically. And that's what
Mhm.
that really struck me is, wow, she got really caught up in the passion, the emotion, which is fantastic. But one of the things I think that they don't teach you until later are some of the things that can go wrong. And maybe that's what it was so powerful to me is, God, this is a
Mhm.
great example of all the things that we talk about that could go wrong. Not
Right.
mixing business with pleasure, not getting things in
Mhm.
writing, not protecting yourself, not staying true to yourself, making sure that all
Mhm.
you're always staying with an honest voice, and that you're thinking about your team and that you're a strong leader. And I mean, it was like, wow, this is like business for women 101, the things they don't teach in college.
Right. No, absolutely. And that's 100%. And the big thing about it is that she was very ambitious, and it came across in such a genuine way
Uh-huh.
that the appreciation verbally she was getting, and when they named her, as the one of the co-founders, I think she just felt such a I'm one of the boys now. I'm one of the, I mean, really, and we've
Yeah.
all probably been through this in some different areas, right? It's just,
Mhm.
it's a different feeling. And then she just felt so secure in her trust for them that she compromised herself.
Mhm.
And that's, that's not it's not a bad thing in that she was trying to stay true to herself,
Right.
but
Right.
she couldn't. She lost herself in it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so easy to do when
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
success is coming hard and fast like that, and it's
Yes.
everything you've wanted and you don't want to lose it.
Yeah, and you're so excited. Like your adrenaline is, going so quickly for something like that.
Mhm.
And she was so talented, has so much talent, and the talent was really coming through in how she presented herself and how she was doing in conversations and just everything about it. And they trusted her
Mhm.
with everything until they didn't.
Right, right. And yeah, go
So what made that? You know what I mean? Like they
ahead.
trusted her as long as it was working for them.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then all of a sudden they
Absolutely.
didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but it was like it's almost like once she got to the table, she expected them to behave
Mhm.
like or then think like she would, right? And
Mhm.
I think that is one of the hardest things that I had to learn throughout my career is not everyone thinks like you do. Not everyone
Mhm.
behaves like you do. And so while you don't want to always be cynical and, on defense, you do need to be strategic. And we do
Mhm.
need to, as women, unfortunately, you and I've talked about this several times since we started our podcast, have to put sometimes more thought and forethought
Mhm.
into some things until it becomes second nature, right? Like I'm sure
Mhm.
at a certain point, probably, where you and I sort of are now, some things become second nature, right?
Mhm.
But until
Right.
then, it is what it is. You can say all
Mm.
day, I shouldn't have to XYZ, right?
Mhm.
But
Right.
you can say that and it most likely, unless you just get really lucky, it's gonna at some point come back to bite you. Is you can
Mhm.
say I shouldn't have to all day long, but
But the reality is you do.
mhm,
So, and that's the thing. I think that she felt that the compassion she was having for when they were going through, like in the preview that we
mhm,
watched, the pictures she was trying to get taken down.
mhm,
And she was just thinking they were going to be as concerned as she was. And
mhm,
when they weren't, she didn't really know what to do with it,
mhm. And
you
she
know?
became afraid. She even told the girls, she's like,
Mhm.
I don't want to lose my seat at the table. And so
Mhm.
she became afraid to speak up. And, it is hard when you're thinking about the entire company versus, one segment of
Absolutely.
the audience. It is hard, right? It's
Mhm.
hard to make
Mhm.
those balanced decisions when really there is no such thing as a balanced decision.
Mhm. No, yeah, and I think sometimes you go through it too, right? And I can only imagine, but I know for me, it's is this the battle I want to go down?
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
Like how far do I want to go with this one? Because
Mhm.
there are going to be more than one. Is this
Absolutely.
the one I want to take that, you know? And
Mhm.
those are the things we have to think about. And I'm certain men don't go in there and go, you know what, this is not the one I want to fight about, because those things that she was fighting for were important to her
Mhm.
until she was too emotional.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Until it became, and that's where that, unfortunately we got to think about it sometimes until that's when
Mhm.
the emotion overrode her logic and her trust. And again, we don't want to be cynical. We don't want to be
Yes.
cynical and untrusting and all of those
Right.
things, but we just can't forget the things that we've covered the last couple of weeks, right? That it still
Mhm.
is essentially a man's world. And
Mhm.
yes, there are exceptions. There are, companies like the new boss she found, and then only to find
Mhm.
out she's faced with, not the same situation,
Not the same situation, right.
but similar. And that's,
Right.
she made a different decision and it worked out for her, but it could have very
Mhm.
easily not.
It could
It could have
have.
very easily. I didn't think it was going to, honestly, since I
I
didn't know the
didn't think
story.
so either. Yeah. And she was very removed from what was happening with the parent company, right? So she didn't see it like she did in the previous situations. So it was very, it's very interesting that what her thought process was initially of that situation, because she was removed.
Right.
I mean, and that is the same thing, right? So if we're not seeing it, sometimes we don't, not that we don't believe it, but we're just like, I mean, is it really as bad as they're saying?
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
So, she was faced from a different side of it, but she did handle that right, because she had learned that she wanted to stand on her principles, and that was more important to her. And it did work out for her.
It did. It could have
she learned all those lessons.
Yeah, it's true. That's why I said she's a quick learner, because sometimes I don't think I've learned everything in my life that quickly.
Right.
But she did. And, but what I thought was really interesting too, which I think is another lesson kind of for us to point out for younger women at work, is you got to be prepared, right? You got to be prepared to face the consequences. And so that means one of the things I'm always teaching in leadership, and that I honestly didn't realize was such a big component of leadership until I started really studying leadership and teaching it, is contingency planning. And basically every good leader, not just women, but you should always know when you're making a decision, if it does not go my way, if this doesn't happen, what is my plan B, right? What is going to happen? She didn't have a plan B, but she was willing to accept the consequences. And that goes back to that, unfortunately, that making decisions emotionally. And Vince said it really good when we had him on for the WWMD, What Would Men Do night, is he said, if somebody's not respecting me, or workplace is not respecting me, he said, I'm on my way out. Now, that doesn't mean I'm doing stupid things. I'm not quitting. I'm not getting all emotional and saying I quit, which, looking back, is one of the things Whitney probably could have done a little differently, is not gone in there with an ultimatum, right? But Vince said, I would be planning my exit strategy, whether it be 6 months, a year, I would be planning my exit strategy. So if, looking back, hindsight being 2020, and she didn't really have that opportunity with the Bumble scenario, it was a little different.
Sure.
But that's one of the, if I could make recommendations to young Whitney, it would have been, hey, don't sacrifice yourself, but get your ducks in a row. Don't go in, don't make an ultimatum. You can go in and say, address it. I'm having a hard time working with him, XYZ, but don't say it's me or it's him, because you might not like the answer. So just start preparing for all you can control is you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think that's the biggest lesson. But all you can control is you, but you have to make sure you're in that right space, right?
Correct.
And that's the thing, is to know whether you're in that right space or not takes that time to get there. And I think that's what she was learning, obviously. Wasn't expecting in the business world. She didn't have any knowledge or mentor or coach or leader or any of that to help her navigate through it. Partially because she was working the entire time, and everybody she was relying on is who she was with 90% of her time. The other time she was sleeping,
Right. And most of the senior people were male. Like, she had women she worked with, but they were in those lower level admin positions, so
exactly.
That's a struggle too. Almost every powerful businesswoman that you hear about has this kind of, not necessarily that dramatic as Whitney's story, but has that bad story, right? That has that time that things went wrong. And, unfortunately, sometimes life can be the best teacher, but they will often point to some scenario where they learned lessons like that because of what we're talking about here. They didn't learn these things in school. They didn't learn, and it's one thing to learn about it in theory, right? In like leadership class or whatever. It's another thing to have a woman standing up in front of you and going, these are the kind of things you're going to be faced with. You're going to be faced with whether or not you should date at work, especially if you're young. You're not married, they're not married. Young company, it's going to be a question. It's going to be a question. You've got to decide in advance, what your rules are going to be. And then you need to know what's going to happen if, especially if it's someone senior to you, right? We saw that. We talked about it. We're going to talk about it next week. We saw that with the Kristen Cabot and Andy, can't remember his last name, but the whole, Coldplay concert thing, he
Mhm.
was senior to her. And in my
Mhm.
opinion, and I think yours too,
Mhm.
more as much or more at fault because it was kind of like he was the authority figure. Like,
Mhm.
we say that, in God forbid, cases of children abuse, the adult should be the one, right? Should be the
Mhm.
one that has the adult that has the
Mhm.
responsibility. Well, it should be the same way at work. Andy,
Mhm.
what was his last name? Do you remember?
I forget. I don't even
I do
remember. That's so
Andy,
bad.
CEO Andy, CEO number one, because apparently she was married to Andy, a different Andy than the CEO. So CEO Andy that she was at the Coldplay concert with, he should have known, I mean, he should have been the one. He was senior to her. He hired her. And so anyway, yes, I mean, she was a grown adult too. So I'm not absconding her from blame, but I'm saying she got or not all, but the majority of the blame. And even though he resigned, that's one of the things you have to be prepared for, right? Is like, if you're
Right.
going to have those kind of relationships, they're most likely, if they do not end up being that 1 in a million that just turns out great, you're probably going to be the one that's going to suffer career-wise.
Right. Right. So in the notes where we have the disposable versus
Mhm.
indispensable, right?
Mhm.
So that's the thing. Where did that fall in the whole scenario of, did those men think that she was disposable even when they were portraying her as a partner,
Mhm.
co-founder, as they put it in the movie? Were
Mhm.
they, at that time, were they just hyping her up to hype her up,
Mhm.
but not really thinking that she was indispensable? Clearly, that is what the case was.
Well, they clearly, in my opinion, overvalued themselves, because she
Mhm.
was doing the bulk of what you and I both know is what
Mhm.
made the company successful, right? It's
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
grassroots marketing she did. It
Mhm.
is that, all of the, no, okay, I shouldn't say all, as portrayed in the movie,
Mhm.
allegedly, the ideas that really catapulted Tinder were hers and her
Mhm.
energy. And to not be indispensable with that kind of track record told me a
Mhm.
couple of things. One, they did not understand the value
Mhm.
of what she was bringing to the table. They didn't get it. Two,
Mhm.
they thought they could do it, that they could,
Right.
oh, it's nothing. It's no big deal. If she can do it, we can do it. We don't need her, And
Mhm.
then three, that, bro code was going to be thicker than
Right.
anything else, where and to me, one thing I didn't think about, but now that I'm thinking about it in hindsight, and when you were saying a minute ago, you turn your computer over to IT, send the email, it's almost like
Mhm.
he switched into cover my ass mode,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Where it
Absolutely.
became about okay, we need to make sure we don't have any legal liability. We need to get rid of her, be done,
Mhm.
you know?
Correct. And move on. Right.
hmm
And we're already growing, so we can just move on now.
Right,
Mhm.
right. Good luck,
Mhm.
have a good
Right.
future. But then it got nasty.
Right.
And they wouldn't let her speak, but they were speaking about her. They
Mhm.
not only did they do all of this to her, but they really tried to ruin her professional
They
reputation.
did. Mhm. Absolutely. And that's another thing, right? So you have all these where you see men, corporations, any of that sort of stuff, go after the personal attacks on
Mhm.
women,
Mhm.
right? And that's what they were doing to her. Just
Mhm.
just like the guy calling her, oh, there's the whore.
Mhm.
Okay, well, what made that her? Like, how was that okay? I mean,
Yeah.
clearly it wasn't okay. I mean, we know that, but the point is how did they think it was, the environment, the culture was okay with her being the
Mhm.
bad guy
Mhm.
because adults broke up, and other adults didn't sit back and say, your relationship ended, get over yourselves.
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
but were they not standing up to him because of his position in the company too?
I think that's a big part of it, but it's also, something else you had in the authenticity and depth show notes is about women often being pressured to fit a profile, softer, nicer, quieter. I think that was manipulation on his part too, is for her to do exactly what she did. So for her to, to make her so mad that she said, I can't work with him anymore. So he got rid of her, got her out of the way.
Right.
He made her the fall guy or the scapegoat because she didn't want to seem, like could have confronted him right there, could have turned around and said, that's unacceptable, whatever. But I think he knew because from the movie, the way the movie portrayed him, he was very much a gaslighter. And so I think he knew that if he did that, it was very passive aggressive, that she was not going to confront it, but that she would say to the CEO, I can't work here anymore. And, who knows if they'd even already had a conversation about it, right? Or whatever. But he knew, I think, the way it was going to go. And he was playing into that. Women feel like they need to be nice. They need to get along. We need to be accommodating. We need to be quieter. We need to do things strategically. We need to handle things appropriately. And I think he took advantage of that.
So what's interesting to me is, and as I sit back and look at it and I think about all the texts that she got and all the different things that were happening, and you look at how she was trying to handle it, and she kept saying, I just want to have a business relationship. I just want to work together, and forget about that. And just, so she was not being emotional.
Right.
He was being very emotional. Name calling, the bad text, those were all emotions, but no one called him emotional. Her boss, the other co-founder, the main co-founder, never once said to her, he's obviously hurting from the breakup.
Right.
He's being very emotional. Just give him time to calm down. None of that happened, but all of the texts that were shown on the show, again, this is the portrayal. I don't know the fact, but I don't want anybody to come at me because I'm just saying what I saw in the movie. But all of that portrayal of those were him being emotional about a breakup. But not one time was he, as a man, taken aside by any of those men and said, you need to calm down.
Right. Right. And you would think, right, that somebody would have done it, but it all kind of goes back to her learning that lesson, right? Thank goodness, like I said, she got something that, a lot of women don't, or people in general don't get, is that second chance. And maybe that's kind of a karmic payback for her, but it's like you had this question on her and here, and it says, if you stop trying to fit into the profile of what you think leadership should look like, how would you lead differently? And I think that the way she led in the Bumble environment, and, of course, at the time, as far as she knew, she had support to be, a strong woman, do things the way she wanted to, but she led with authenticity, but still very shrewdly and very made sure she had all her, T's crossed, her I's dotted, her ducks in a row. And I think that is really important for women to understand, is that it does not have to be one or the other, right? You don't have to be a ball breaker or a doormat, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that is one of the hardest lessons that women in business have to learn or that we do learn, whether we like it or not, or whether it's painful or not, is that you don't have to be one extreme or the other. I feel like we see a lot of that, is you see either the real, devil wears Prada, bitchy boss, or you have the boss that is too nice and everybody walks all over her. And in leadership, it's really finding that balance. And ultimately it boils down to being authentic. Is when things aren't right, you say they're not right, but you don't have to scream them and you don't have to cry them. You just, when they're not right, you say they're not right. You address it logically, you give support for your ideas, and it's okay to be passionate, but it's not okay to lose control. And that's men or women, right?
Yeah, Absolutely. And I think the thing that I think about too with her with the Bumble, if you look at it, and I know that, there were issues with her capitalist, the capital, the guy who gave her the capital and things like that, the parent company. But if you look at it, to her, she was almost like a remote, it was almost like he was just her venture capitalist, right?
Yeah.
Like there was a lot she got to do on her own. He wasn't physically there. It wasn't a big office. It was just her and her team. And they were able to create the environment she wanted the whole time. And that's because she didn't have to live up to anybody's expectations. She could set her own boundaries. So with what we know about venture capitalists not giving the money to women, I think that's just another point of that's how things work better is if you have someone like her who has that drive and has that intelligence and things like that, and you support them in a way that they can run and do their thing, knowing that they are going to do it, and then it's successful. And I think that's a good point for where that ends is she believed in herself and she stuck to her guns. And she did get hit with some obstacles at the end too, but she stuck to what she believed and who she wanted to be in that. And it worked out really well. But had she not had that initial one where she just needed the money and that was all she just needed the money to make it happen. And I think that's true with a lot of women.
For sure. And, two other things, and again, this was in your show notes as well. Two other things I think that really she learned that are also hard lessons to learn, but is resisting labels, right? Is not worrying so much about what other people are going to say, call you, etc. Those kind of things you can't, and that's kind of what I was meaning, earlier about the only thing you can control is you. You can do everything right, and you're still going to have some people that are going to hate you. You can do everything wrong, and you're still going to have some people that are going to love you. And you just never know, right? Because people are people, they've all got their own thing going on. So all you can do is stay true to yourself. But she also built alliances. And I think that is something that men do that very well. I feel like women, and some of it's historical. We've constantly been in competition with each other because the spot's limited, right? The one seat at the table, how she talks about when she was at Tinder, there's the one seat at the table for women. There is the, women are, cutthroat because in general, we have this perception of not all women, especially if it's a male dominated business or industry, not all of us are going to make it to the top. So we're clawing for those spots. And, it's one of those things where I think she realized that she needed to get over that. And once she started building her alliances and her network, she started getting confidence. She started having allies, and she started realizing that the table is big enough for all of us, right? And when we win together, then we're sitting at our own table instead of trying to fit in at a table where we don't fit, right? Or where we are out of place. We're building our own table.
That's exactly it. And unfortunately, I mean, that's, we're running out of options other than creating our own, honestly. And I mean, it's sad that we're in 2025 and we're still here. We're still having these conversations, and we're still having to recreate our culture or create a culture for us and kind of pave the way a little bit more. It's kind of crazy to me that we're still talking about paving the way for women in business. Honestly, it honestly seems crazy to me that we still are having these conversations and that they are even a conversation. I mean, Ruth Bader, RBG said, when asked about, and I'm going to butcher this, right? But it's not verbatim, but when asked how many women do you think should be on the Supreme Court? When will it be enough women on the Supreme Court? And she said, when there are 9 women. And everyone thought that was crazy because, well, then it would be all women. And she said, yes, but it's been all men all of these years. And no one thought that was crazy. So to me, that's, and I mean, you look at how long ago that was. And then here we are still having those conversations.
Well, it's funny because, we're talking about like bits and pieces of this with Vince, but I was on Twitter. I still call it Twitter, right? X. I was on X the other day, and I think it was like Sunday, and somebody was talking about a woman who wrote an article about the same kind of topics, right? And so I was doing research, and they were saying, oh yeah, but once she shows by writing that article that she's one of those women, she's going to have a hard time getting hired. And I was like, are we really in 2025 that they're saying you can't even write an article supporting women without seeming like you're going to be a problem and you're unhireable? No wonder women aren't talking or speaking.
Right. Because why would you? You're getting labeled again. So again, it goes back to the judgment. Right. So the same type of thing. She's getting judged because of an idea that someone has. And until we can start paving the way to get rid of those thought processes, those, inconsistencies, even, because then women don't know who they can be what with in corporations when you go in for an interview or for a, in a sales meeting or any of these things. And we have to assess the room every time we walk in it, whether we're there to sell something, we're there to buy something, we're there to have a conversation, whatever we are walking into a room for, we have to assess the room before we can even have a conversation with anybody. And that's not just business, that's in our personal life too.
Right. And choosing the right words and making sure words don't come across too harsh. Are they going to start a fight? Am I making sure to say, I think, and not, be general? Am I making sure that I'm not going to evoke negative emotion and that I'm going to be heard and that I'm, and as you know, I told you I was having a conversation with our boss the other day who, not to stroke his ego at all, but he does try, right? He does try.
He does. Yes.
And in general, and succeeds most of the time. But I was telling him, I was making that statement going, well, I said something about, I said, well, that's probably not the right word to use. The right word is probably, I don't remember what we were talking about. And I was like, because I want to make sure that, I mean, da, 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 and not da, 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 da. And I said, do you understand how exhausting it is to be a woman, to constantly think, not just about doing your job or, hey, I need to go have a meeting, but I need to think about the mindset of the person. What are their preconceived notions? What is the right language for me to use so that I get my point across and so that I'm heard and I know I'm serious, but I'm not too serious. And that I'm, and he was like, really? Shocked, right? And he's a smart guy. And he was like,
absolutely.
That goes through your head. I'm like, every conversation I have professionally. And he was like, well, that's just you. I'm like, well, no, if any smart woman, that's happening.
Absolutely.
And I said, you just don't realize it. I'm just telling you, that it's going on for any woman who is actively working her career. She is having maybe not as much of a conversation on every single thing, because this was a pretty important conversation we were having, but is thinking about all those things, many of them in every reaction she makes and takes.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, we have to think about it with men, but we also have to think about it with other women.
For sure.
Because we're not at the point where we all align and go, you're right, let's get this done. We're still not there yet either from our side. And I mean, she showed that in the movie as well, and acknowledged, right? So, and that to me, that's all very factual as far as how things are. I don't know about her scenario. I'm just saying, as a woman in business, to me, those are factual feelings. Those are actual things I have felt, thought, any of that sort of thing. And she did get to a point where it was about bringing, those women with her because she knew their value. And it wasn't that she ever doubted their value. It was that she doubted her strength at that table.
Absolutely. And whether or not she could hold her space. And I think sometimes women, we kind of feel like success or, success in the business space is like, those Lay's bag of potato chips you get now that have like 5 potato chips in the bag, and you open it and you're like, there's only 5 potato chips in here. Sometimes we look at success, I think, like that. Like there's only so much, and
Right.
that's all there is. And so we've got to fight over that, little bit of success. And I'm not sure again where I mean, there's probably many places that came from, the limited spots for women, senior positions. We still know that they're limited, right? I think it was only 30% of women are in senior positions. So maybe that's where it comes from. But we are much more forceful as a wave than as our own little individual movement, gust of wind, right?
Absolutely.
Is when we all work together, and especially if we all stand together. And I don't know how we instill that in women as a whole, other than we keep having these conversations, because it's going to have to be something that's not just lip service. It is, we stand together, because I think it's a lot of lip service about women supporting women, right?
Agreed.
We all do better when we do, there's a lot of lip service about it. But when it all comes down to it, my experience in the workplace has been that women like that are few and far between, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I would agree with you. And I have had, male bosses, female bosses, and all of, coworkers working for me, all of those things. I was very fortunate in one of the very first female bosses that I had, and I was very young at the time, but she was very much about women and about bringing that kind of together. And that was an amazing experience. It's tough to find that though. You don't have that all the time, especially women who've been in business, who have had to be cutthroat to get to where they are, and who have had to be almost emotionless about everything.
Right. Had to pick one or the other, right?
Correct. You had to decide. You couldn't be yourself. You had to be that person, So it really, I feel like it comes down to now we have to start having these conversations with the girls, with my girls, with, high school and up. We have to start instilling in them that their value,
right?
And not just their value in a boardroom or in a whatever, that they understand that they bring as much value as anyone else. Male, female, doesn't matter. And we have to start instilling in that in somehow. And I know that for me, that was not something I had growing up.
Right.
I mean, where are you going to get it? So I feel as if that is something we have to start. We have to start having those conversations, and we have to find that audience or those people who can connect and start creating that networking of people to do that.
100%, and we've talked about our courses that we have coming, and mine, I have 2. One is Success Brain and one is the Quantum Mindset. But the Quantum Mindset is about that, is understanding our purpose and understanding what we uniquely bring to the table, because I think that's part of the problem too, is sometimes we try to fit, square pegs into a round hole, and we try to be everything to everybody. And so we end up being really very little to none, because we're not taking advantage of those things that are really our passion, those things that we're really good at. And I know, and I'll let you speak to in just a second. You have your resilience course, which is also another aspect of that, right? Realizing that we're not going to always succeed, and what, it's how we go after that. But I always say, I start that course off with this question: I call it the $33 million question. If you had 33, and there's been variations of this, it's nothing like, but if you had $33 million in your bank right now, all of a sudden just appeared there, what would you be doing? And so that kind of will let you give insight into what you really would love to do, where your passion is. And then it builds out from there. Cause a lot of women, especially if they're in childbearing ages, will say, I would be spending all my time with my children. Okay. All right.
Mhm.
So why is that? Well, I want to spend all my time with my children. What do you like doing with your children? Well, how does it
Mhm.
make you feel? Then extrapolating that to where you can get that same feeling, maybe in a job that lets you work toward that,
Mhm.
since you have to work for a living. And it's really carrying that question out and keeping the conversation going in your own
Mhm.
mind about, it's not as simple as money, right? If I had $33 million, what would I do? Nothing. No, wrong.
No,
You'd be
right.
doing something, if it's, oh, well, I would travel because I love to travel. Okay, well, have you thought about having a travel blog, starting a travel blog on the side
Mhm.
while you're working DoorDash, or have you thought about, becoming a travel agent? It's really getting into what if money was off the table and you didn't just have to work for a
Mhm.
living, really thinking about what would bring you joy is a good way to figure out how to get joy into your life right now. And so anyway,
Mhm.
then you get into the whole quantum mind shift, which is actually is right. The more you have joy
Yes.
right now, the more you bring in. So anyway,
Right.
but tell us a
No,
little
and
about
that's
your
true.
resilience course too.
Well, and I mean, it plays in similar, mindset is a lot of things, right? So with
Mhm.
me, for the resilience is that it isn't about perfection. It's about adapting, recovering, and thriving through challenges. And I
Mhm.
think this movie is exactly that.
Mhm.
I think this gives us a good, but what you have to do is you have to, we have to have a guide. People have coaches for sports. People have coaches for everything in life. You have financial, you have this. But what we don't do a lot of is we don't look at that
Mhm.
for ourselves in personal, for ourselves in business. And
Mhm.
you really have to, in order to be resilient, you have to have somebody to talk to. You have to have
Mhm.
a plan. You
Mhm.
have to create some sort of plan. And I'm not talking, oh, I'm going to go from this point to this point to this
Right.
point. It is having a plan and understanding strategies of
Mhm.
how to get through those hurdles. Because if you don't have strategies for them, they're going to become overwhelmed.
And you'll
And
feel
you're going to
hopeless.
be exactly. And then you get into a mode where your mindset's not right, you're
Mhm.
physically not right. Like it becomes overwhelming.
Yes.
And the whole thing about resilience is understanding how to get through that. And
Mhm.
and to do it standing your ground, but you're standing your ground for yourself, but you can do that and have empathy for others at the same
Mhm.
time, because that's not a weakness. It's the foundation. So that's what my whole course is about, is understanding how to get through those and build off of each one.
For sure. And it's, not when we become helpless. If we think we are helpless, then we become hopeless. And if we
Mhm,
become hopeless, nothing's going to get better, right?
mhm,
It's got
absolutely.
to be, it's got to stop. It's got to redirect before it ever gets
Mhm,
there, because you're just going to create more of what you focus on. And whether you call
mhm,
that the law of attraction, the law of assumption, whether you call it just karma, whether
right.
you call it, Murphy's law, whatever you want to
Mhm,
call it, you're going
mhm,
to get more of what you focus on. And so you've got to be
mhm,
really careful with what you focus on from just
mhm,
a higher level perspective, because
absolutely.
it's like when you don't ever see like a Toyota Highlander, and then somebody gets a Toyota Highlander, right? And now all
Or
of a sudden,
you get one.
right, all you see is Toyota Highlanders everywhere, right? It's
Exactly.
because
Exactly.
we see what we focus on.
Mhm,
It's where our attention goes, and where our attention goes, that's often where our money goes, and that's often where our time goes. And so we've got to be very intentional with those things. So yeah, if anybody who is watching this has not seen that movie, I highly
please
recommend
do.
it. I had never seen this actress that I know of, Lily. I can't remember her last name. Lily. I
I
don't
don't
remember.
remember either,
Me
but she
neither.
was very good.
Yeah, she was very good.
Mhm,
It is on Hulu. Fantastic movie.
it is.
Michelle, before we go, anything you want to add? Any kind of last thoughts?
So whether it's dating or business, the lesson from Swiped is this: shallow judgments don't create lasting success. Real impact comes from depth, authenticity, and the courage to lead beyond stereotypes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Michelle. As always, great talk. And for those of you that are with us now, thank you for being here. For those that
Yes.
will watch in the future, thank you for joining us. And if you watch the movie, we'd love for you to leave in the comments what you
Yes.
thought about the movie. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you have a favorite line? Was there a favorite part? and what you think about any of these topics at all.
Absolutely.
Just don't turn it into Tinder in the comments. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
All right. Have a good night,
All right.
Michelle. Bye,
Thanks, you
everybody.
too.
Bye.
Bye.